gotta balance food and activity, working together.
I have a take about poutine, one that has upset people in the past, one that is stubbornly rejected by those who've solicited it from me. That's right, until today it's one that I've never shared without being asked first. It's never been an opinion I felt the need to disclose without prompt, but a recent experience of mine changed that. Anyways, the take is this. You can't go too crazy with a poutine lest it stop being a poutine and start becoming just fries with shit on top. Now, lucky for you, I'm trustworthy, so I'm going to tell you up front, my take is right. All these naysayers, mostly fellow video essayists, are wrong, incredibly wrong. See, me, I've met most of these folks, and let me tell you, not a single one of them has any good food takes, not a single fucking one. Honestly, it's ridiculous of me to bring them together here to share their food takes. None of them know how to eat. So the take's not too bad, right? Well, it's where I draw the line on too crazy that raises eyebrows. Look, on the extreme, one of the worst poutines I ever had in my life was trying to be a sort of nacho situation. It was topped with sour cream, refried beans, guacamole, and jalapeno poppers. So silly. It was crazy. It was just improperly executed. I don't think there's a way to incorporate Tex-Mex into poutine. And hey, I feel like it's not too hard to agree with. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it's the lower end of what I consider non-kosher that gets me called in for questioning. Ironically, while steamed pork hot dogs are a perfectly acceptable topping, and in fact one of poutine's named variants, they call that a poutine saucisse at most Bel Pros, beef hot dogs cross a boundary. I even argue that apparently wackier variants, like the poutine italienne, are more true to form poutines because of the process that thought them up. Poutine italienne is what you get when the cook at the casse-croûte runs out of gravy and he's got meat sauce and figures, why not? Beef hot dogs, on the other hand, are a deliberate choice, a conscious effort made by someone whose first time it is making a poutine for themselves, and they reach for a premium ingredient as a substitution for a cheaper but traditional one. And God help me if their hot dogs are grilled rather than steamed. Anyone suggesting beef hot dogs instead of pork is doing so because they think it'd be better. They don't want to have an authentic experience, they want to have it their way. And hey, it's probably true that they'll enjoy it more like that, but a poutine is a thing. It's not just three things haphazardly thrown together. Poutine has an essence, a form, and it's not something to be leveled up in the same way that, say, adding Cheese Whiz turns fries into cheese fries. To level it up is selfish. The purpose of poutine was and is to be something in the place of anything else. To be substituteless, yet accessible. It's filling and comprised of cheap, basic ingredients that every local diner had on hand and nothing more. As its name implies, it's just a mess, the result of making the most as one can with Quebec in a single bowl, affordably fueling its working class populace with a cherished byproduct of their own dairy industry. You can't fancy it up without missing the point, fuck. And that's the thing. Using a higher quality freaking hot dog to avoid having to use a cheaper one is all about fancying it. Nobody with the time to judge should be eating, let alone making, a poutine in the first place. A fancy or marginally fancier poutine is not a poutine, because by definition, a poutine is cheap casse-croûte food. Please understand, authenticity does not imply quality. You still don't get it. Okay, let me take you on a trip to a little island in the Pacific. Historically a land whose population fed themselves sustainably, today 90% of Hawaii's food is imported from overseas. Aside from a few select fruits and fish, nothing you consume there began its existence anywhere nearby. Rather than submit to the beautiful Polynesian environment and accept the natural gifts it has to offer, many folks refuse to cut loose their usual lifestyles while vacationing, failing to try anything outside of their comfort zones. A choice that comes with a hefty cost and strains the island's economy and food security. You want to eat steak, pizza, hamburgers, cake? Cool. It'll cost you double what it does anywhere else, but you can do it. Having milk and eggs for breakfast will easily run you $20. Cereal? Forget it. Whereas fresh fruit and fish, some of the best and most affordable you'll ever have in your life, so close to their source, well, most folks seem too scared to venture that far down the aisle. Hawaii is home to one of the world's largest Japanese diasporas, many descendants of immigrant sugarcane plantation workers who settled in the early 1900s. Japanese cuisine is often characterized by its diverse and unique use of seasonal ingredients. Food is meant to be as stunning as it is complex and flavorful. Sometimes the preparation itself is part of the presentation. So, How do you think they adapted to living in a place that imports the majority of its food, and where all but the wealthy were deprived of quality ingredients? Well, the plantation workers packed their lunchboxes with what was the most they could make given the cheapest and lowest quality of imports available to them. They uncovered a transformative use for an imported lunch meat so repugnant that its name is shared with that of male we don't want. Spam musubi is the Japanese immigrant worker take on onigiri, or rice balls. A lunch meat so heavily processed as to be considered fake? Spam was one of few low-cost food products imported regularly to Hawaii en masse, mostly to sustain the appetites of soldiers stationed in the Pacific base. Japanese Hawaiians invented this dish mostly out of a need for a meal that wouldn't cut much into their wages, but also because it consisted of some of the only ingredients they consistently had on hand. Spam became, and still is, ubiquitous in Hawaiian cooking. You'll often find it subbed in for more expensive breakfast meats like bacon and sausage. In this application, though, a thin slice of the canned meat is fried until lightly crispy on the outside, then glazed in a simple teriyaki sauce. The container itself is used as a mold to form a thick stack of rice that the spam is layered onto, and of course, it's wrapped in nori to hold it all together. Now, much like poutine, locality impacted its popularity and adoption. Spam musubi is a product of the circumstances of those who created it, and to deviate from its simplicity is to miss its point. Spam is obviously a shitty meat. It's not good for you and it doesn't taste great. At the very least, not as good as the less processed meat it's derived from. So if I wanted to improve spam musubi, the spam itself is a prime candidate for substitution. I might cut right to the chase and instead fry up an actual piece of ham, what spam itself emulates. And hey, that might actually result in something better, a more cohesive, smokier, richer type of spam musubi. Except, I've not really made spam musubi, have I? No, somewhere along the way, in changing the one thing I did, my creation stopped being spam musubi and started being something else. Ham musubi, I guess. Let's break this down. 2 questions to ask here. Did I make something better than spam musubi? Yeah, kinda did. But did I make a better spam musubi? No, I didn't. Spam musubi is a dish defined by and born of limitation. The conscious effort I'm able to make in my kitchen, that of improving it, is not one afforded to its original makers. Spam musubi is what it is because it's all that it could be. Japanese Hawaiians didn't have anything better than spam to pack in their lunches. They didn't have anything cheaper than spam to incorporate into their rice balls. Hell, I myself can't even make an authentic spam musubi at home because the closest I can get to it is fucking cam. There are too few ingredients in this recipe, and the process is too simple for even the most minor alteration and not to wander too far from its original meaning. A spam with ham can't be called a spam, and a spam with cam can't even be called a spam. I guess I made cam musubis? Oh, fuck. Although not of the culture myself, I live here in Quebec and appreciate what poutine represents. To me, it isn't just a random snack or a fun idea to try, and it's definitely not just improved French fries, demotable to simply a richer variant of cheese fries. No. Here, poutine is a beloved comfort food. It's a warm, sustaining meal that's neither hard to find nor to eat. It's 3 things for crying out loud. Des frites, du fromage quick, puis de la sauce. It carried me through many long, demanding school days and topped off countless late nights out. Yet, in its simplicity, one shouldn't omit its significance. It still manages to evoke a sense of nostalgia and cultural pride in those with the privilege of coming from the same place as it. As it's been proliferated throughout the world, particularly south of the border, the rebranding of poutine as a Canadian dish rather than a Quebecois one has left some calling out appropriation. That might sound silly to you, it's just fries with gravy and cheese, right? But let me translate the French here for you. To present poutine as Canadian is as dumb as trying to pass off spam musubi as American. Some even see it as a way to undermine and delegitimize Quebecois culture and self-determination, as I imagine Hawaiians would were their dish to receive the same treatment. Once in Halifax, I spied a grocery store display titled Best of British, stocked entirely with cans labeled Scottish haggis. It would look just as fucking funny to see poutine packaged under a banner reading Best of Canada. The fuck? Why does it matter though, right? Poutine is junk food. It is, but It's unique French-Canadian junk food that nobody else seems to understand how to do properly, nor the limits of. It calls back to an era of greasy casse-croûtes, side-of-the-road stops that fried their fries fresh and got their curds locally. That's the thing people often forget. Cheese curds are a rural indulgence, only available in their best state nearest to where their production occurs, often around Québécois dairy farms. Cheese curds symbolize local sourcing, they symbolize Quebec. They're a byproduct that doesn't last long on a shelf, nor on a truck. It gives me a strange pride in having tried poutines in the United States multiple times out of curiosity, and all but once having been severely disappointed, including two in Wisconsin, cheese curd capital of the United States, where you'd think, of all places, that's where they could get it right. Fucking unbelievable. Tu sais qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait? Ils ont batter puis frit les crottes de fromage en premier, puis après l'ont mis dans un big pile de McCain Super Fries ou whatever they had the fuck in the back of their freezer. Ben voyons donc, man, c'était du fries on fries, ça avait pas d'allure. Puis en plus, le restaurant se prenait pas pour un soda flat, c'était un big deal qu'il y avait une poutine sur le menu. They were advertising it, and to get it that wrong. Oof. If it's unjust to wrongly attribute poutine, then I think it's just as unfair to badly assemble it. A poutine is fresh-cut fries, squeaky cheese curds, and hot gravy to keep it all nice and warm. And most importantly, it comes from here, and it's meant to be affordable. Any of these vectors change, it's not a poutine anymore. Your cheese curds aren't local and lost their squeak in transit, not a poutine. Your fries come from McCain, not a poutine. You're passing it off as a Canadian dish and your gravy is actually Swiss chalet sauce, not a poutine. And most egregiously, by seeking to make any changes aimed at improving its quality beyond what can be produced locally or be afforded with the emptiest wallet here, you're failing to grasp its true essence. Sorry, but a premium beef hot dog poutine is not a poutine saucisse. A poutine saucisse, there's smaze in that, nothing better. Spam masubi, there's spam in that, nothing better. Because if there's one thing I hope you take from this, it's this. Some things are meant to taste the way they do, and are defined by their simplicity and origin. There's no way to make them taste better without ignoring the limitation that spawned them and forfeiting their identity. Poutine isn't a playground where you can do anything you want. It's not just fries with shit on top. It has a form. Not everything needs to or can be made your way. What you should remember is that authenticity does not imply quality.
After waking up to your alarm after a long night's sleep, there's nothing better to start your day than a high-quality breakfast. And I'll be the first to admit I'm not good at this. Half the time I just drive through the drive-thru. Sometimes I don't even grab breakfast at all, which is extra bad. But, you know, I definitely notice the difference between when I do have a nice quality breakfast and when I don't. It helps change my outlook on the day. It makes me feel energized, makes me feel good. And to me, there's a lot of different breakfast options, but nothing's more quintessential than eggs. And there's tons of different ways to make eggs. You can break them potentially. I'm gonna put this back. You can scramble them, you can poach them, you can make a little eggs Benedict situation, you can do an omelet, but to me there's nothing more quintessential than eggs on toast, scrambled eggs on toast. And every time, ever since I started cooking, I've always made them the same way. I've put a little bit of butter in the pan, put a little bit of cheese in there, because I always like cheese in my eggs.
Is the cheese. You gotta add the cheese.
I've scrambled the eggs, I put a little salt and pepper, get a piece of toast, butter the toast, and put the eggs on top, and that's really kind of all there is to it. And for a long time I was fine with that, and I was okay with that, but it occurred to me that maybe I could be doing something better. I've spent a lot of time, working in the kitchen and trying to make better things and make my cooking more interesting.
Like, there's cheese in this. Like, you go to a restaurant, you ask for cheese in your eggs, and they look at you like you're crazy. I think the cheese is a crutch. I don't know, I think you can do better.
Is that a challenge?
It's a challenge! Maybe there's a perfect scrambled egg, and if I can find it, if I can figure it out, then I would just make that all the time, and everyone can make that all the time, and the debate's over, and we've settled it, and we figured it out. Every professional chef has their idea on what the perfect scrambled egg is. So I figured that the best place to start was a resource that I had in my kitchen. One in particular is how to cook everything. If I'm gonna learn how to cook scrambled eggs, it should be in this book. They have the everyday scrambled eggs, and that's cool, but we're going for the best scrambled eggs. And of course, they have a recipe entitled The Best Scrambled Eggs, so that's the one we've gotta go with.
They said to add a dash of cream to it, which I don't understand. I've always been more in the anti-add things to the eggs camp.
Instead of cooking it on, medium-high heat, like I've always done, you cook it low and slow for a very long time, upwards of 40 minutes.
And I mean, maybe the only thing is, like, if this is, like, the best scrambled egg of all time, then, like, maybe the time is worth it, but I don't know that I see that.
But something must have been in the air, because when I made those eggs, the result was not something silky smooth and joyous and beautiful. Instead, a devious concoction was conceived. Yeah, I don't know about this.
You want me to eat this?
That's from How to Cook Everything by
I'm
Mark Bittman.
so sorry, I cannot put that in my mouth. This looks like throw up or like poop or something.
And it's extra bizarre because I tried making them again and then they turned out just fine. But on this day, it just didn't work. This is what you get out of 30 minutes?
The texture is disgusting. It's like slimy and... This is not it.
It's not it?
Mm-mm.
Sorry, Mark Bittman. I'm sure you're fine. I'm sure you're a good guy. Maybe we'll try another chef. We'll see what another cook has to say.
Good idea.
We gotta change it up. We gotta go to higher pedigree, someone more famous. And there's one chef in particular who's a very famous way of making scrambled eggs, and it's Mr. Kitchen Nightmares himself, Mr. Gordon Ramsay. Instead of doing it in a frying pan, he grabs a saucepan.
Which I like this idea, because I think it's too easy on like one of those long, wider pans to overcook them. So if you do this, then it's easier to control that, I feel like.
Instead of doing it low and slow like Mr. Loser Bittman over there, he cooks it on high heat. And he has this very particular strategy about it. Have the pan on high heat, and then you take it off the heat, and on the heat, and off the heat, and on the heat. And that's supposed to help regulate the temperature of the eggs. Then, at the end, you finish it up to cool off the eggs and prevent the cooking. You throw in a dollop of creme fraiche.
They don't have it in the store. I literally asked 3 people in the store. They don't have it. So I tried making my own. This is just a liquidy mess. So we're not gonna do that. I'm just gonna use sour cream because sour cream is supposedly a viable substitute.
And we'll upgrade the bread. We're gonna, I like my potato bread, but we're gonna upgrade it to a real sort of bread situation. And I quite like the result, honestly. I think it turned out pretty good. Definitely better than my original eggs with its cheddar cheese.
That's damn tasty, though.
Now, is that the perfect scrambled egg? I don't really know.
The cream surprised me. I thought that wouldn't work.
I quite like the Ramsay eggs, but my co-taste tester felt otherwise, and she threw a wrench in this whole situation.
I don't know if I'm a creamy egg type of girl. I like my eggs a little more on like the well done side. And you know what I love in my eggs?
What?
Feta.
Feta?
Yeah, I love feta cheese in my eggs.
What happened to like the no cheese thing? That was a crutch.
Well, that was your opinion. Look, I am all about feta. Feta makes everything better.
Fuck! I don't like feta cheese, I'm sorry. And it doesn't even melt properly, so you won't get in the eggs at all, but it is pretty popular. There's a lot of different recipes online that use feta cheese, and sometimes they'll mix in other kinds of vegetables, onions, spinach, that sort of thing. Brought back out the frying pan. We like the thicker, larger curd situation.
Some of this crumbly feta. I'll go for the smaller crumbles of feta.
So yeah, not my favorite.
Clink. I don't really taste the feta that much.
Go.
I'm gonna try it. Oh, it's home. Oh, there it is. It's never been my thing.
But it was her favorite of the lot, so I guess that's a win. But I don't know if they're the perfect eggs. I think I just prefer like the thinner curd. Like, do you like how cooked this is? And how like you like your chunk?
Mm-hmm.
It's just not for me. So it's like I think I prefer going back to like almost the Ramsay method of like just really quickly like on the heat, off the heat, in the saucepan, just really going through, whipping it up. I thought back to what I thought were the best scrambled eggs I'd ever had, and it was a few years ago on a vacation in Asbury Park, New Jersey, at some indiscriminate location. On that day, I had a slice of toast, and on top of that toast was ricotta cheese. And on top of the ricotta cheese was beautiful, luscious, soft scrambled eggs. And could I, as a lowly home cook, potentially recreate this magic in my home kitchen?
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible.
To me, that was the best scrambled egg. That was the perfect one. I had achieved my perfection that I had oh so desired, but it didn't reach a full consensus.
It's just like crazy because like we started with like typical your normal way.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I really like the feta one too, but that one was probably your my favorite, the first one.
The first one.
Probably.
So this is a big old waste of time.
Well, hey, those are your words, not mine.
I was hopeful going into this that I could solve the whole problem and make the definitive scrambled egg, because everyone says you have to do it this way. Different chefs contradict each other all the time with their different ideas. So I thought I, as a lowly YouTuber, could solve this problem. But I can't, because everyone has their own different opinion on the matter, and everyone has their own different taste buds, and everyone has their own ideas on what's easier and what's better and what's more consistent.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show that like different people have their own styles, their own tastes. Everybody's gonna have their own egg preference.
Despite not finding the perfect scrambled egg, or at least not the perfect scrambled egg for everyone, I don't regret doing the process, because at the very least I found the perfect scrambled egg for me. And since then, I've not made scrambled eggs any other way. I'll put a little bit of sour cream in there from the Gordon Ramsay. I use the saucepan, and I'm gonna put the ricotta cheese on there because that changes everything. You might not like it. You might want to do some crazy thing with some feta cheese, or put some freaking olives in there, or take a live sheep and put it on top. Experimentation is great, and we should all experiment with everything that we do creatively, both in and out of the kitchen, because it'll leave us more satisfied, and we'll keep improving our craft and trying new things, and it'll be great. And they lived happily ever after.
Thank you. That's it.
Do you ever think about where your food comes from? As a thought experiment, think about the last meal you ate. Could you tell me where all of its ingredients came from? You might say that it came from your local grocery store, or perhaps even a restaurant. But where did they get it? I wouldn't blame you if you didn't have that specific of an answer to that question, since it's not really something most people have to think about all that often. Most people's relationship with food is largely centered around consumption. People go to the store, buy a bunch of groceries, bring it home, cook it, and eat it. While consumption is the most visceral part of food, food doesn't magically manifest itself out of thin air. In a video game, you can have a town with tons of residents and no fields that is somehow able to feed itself, but that doesn't really work in real life. In real life, food must be produced. My home has given me some insight into the nature of food production. I grew up in Iowa, and if Iowa is known for anything, it is known for its agriculture. If you look at those maps made for elementary schools, Iowa is always represented with a piece of corn, a pig, or some other farm-related thing. Aside from being known as the state who historically has held our election caucus before anyone else, Iowa is known as one big farm. And this is true. But this reputation alone doesn't convey how much food we make. In 2022, Iowa harvested 2.48 billion bushels of corn, making it the largest producer in the country. It has led the nation in corn production for over 20 years. We also produce a staggering amount of pork. We also produce more eggs than any other state, in addition to providing significant amounts of other goods. Farms use 30.5 million of the state's 35.8 million acres, or roughly 85% of the state's land. In comparison, California, the third largest state in the country, only has 24 million agricultural acres. Simply put, Iowa grows a lot. With this in mind, it's inevitable that pretty much every Iowan has some connection to agriculture. For me, this connection came from my grandfather and uncle, who have been farming in Iowa for decades. Growing up, my whole extended family would host reunions on this farm to celebrate birthdays and holidays, and as a result, I spent a not insignificant amount of time playing games on this farm, trying to coax the farm cats out of their timid shells, and exploring. As I got older, I started shucking corn after the harvest, or picking grapes from my uncle's vineyard. Even without a personal connection, farming is such a large aspect of Iowan culture that nobody can fully escape it. Our universities offer degrees in a whole web of fields related to food and its production. Food is the bedrock of our economy, and thus becomes the subject of significant legislative efforts. Growing up in a place where food production is so culturally important has given me an interest in thinking about food and where it comes from. And frankly, I think it is important for everyone to give this subject some thought, because everyone is impacted by how we produce food. Iowa is an agricultural powerhouse, but that comes at a cost, not just for us, but for the whole world. We now live in a globalized economy where goods can be transported further and faster than ever before. This hasn't always been true. In previous historical eras, food production was incredibly localized. Preserving and transporting food used to be incredibly expensive, and only the wealthiest individuals could afford to import food from faraway lands. For most people, their food was grown and cooked by nearby farmers and chefs. There's a decent chance that you might have known some of the people responsible for growing your food back in the day. This is less true today. Because of advancements in preservatives and transportation, shipping food long distances is more achievable than it has ever been. In some regards, this is a good thing, allowing food-dense regions to donate their excess food to regions in need, such as the humanitarian efforts spearheaded by Herbert Hoover to donate food to Belgian and French civilians during World War I, feeding 9 million people, undoubtedly saving many lives. However, I also feel that our globalized food industries have had negative consequences, especially where these consequences overlap with capitalism. Ultimately, one of the costs of globalized food production is that the methods we use to make food have consequences for everyone. As a local example, consider Iowa's use of fertilizer. Crops need certain nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus from the soil to grow properly, but these aren't always replaced naturally after a harvest. Farmers, in an effort to counteract this, use fertilizers to reintroduce these elements into the soil, resulting in greater yields of healthier crops, at least in the short term. However, plants can only absorb so much fertilizer, and the excess nitrogen and phosphorus is washed into water sources like rivers by rain. Much of this runoff ends up in the Gulf of Mexico. Neither nitrogen or phosphorus are toxic, but both are classified as nutrient pollutants because of the disastrous impact they can have in the water. To vastly simplify a complicated process, nitrogen and phosphorus greatly increase the growth of algae past healthy levels. As this algae dies, it is consumed by bacteria, which consumes the water's oxygen levels faster than photosynthesis can replace it, causing the water to suffer from hypoxia and making the area unlivable for fish and underwater creatures. This has resulted in the Gulf of Mexico dead zone, a region so devastated that it can support almost no life. Iowa agriculture contributes significantly to the Gulf dead zone, despite being miles away. The consequences of food production impact everyone. This is just one impact of Iowan agriculture, but I could list dozens of others. When most people interact with food primarily through consumption, it's easier to mask just how many steps go into making food. Farmers need to buy seeds, large farm vehicles, chemicals. They need fuel for those vehicles, labor to spend time planting those seeds. Irrigation is often used, in addition to naturally falling water. Fertilizers and pesticides are applied. Food is harvested, and the crops have to be shipped out for further processing. This often involves trucks, which also need to be fueled. The path a food takes through processing can be long and winding, but generally different chemicals are applied, removed, and delivered. Eventually, a major food brand gets their hands on their ingredients, and they make their final product, put it in packaging. Again, it gets shipped off to a store chain's distribution center, who loads it onto another truck, so it can be put on store shelves, where it is then bought and consumed. This whole process involves many companies, big and small, and the labor of hundreds of individuals, and at every point in this process, different consequences can arise. If I were to go into more detail about some of these consequences, we could genuinely be here for days, but here are just a few. Trucks are how we transport a lot of food in the United States, and these trucks cause significant wear and tear on our roadways. Agricultural land across the US was stolen from Native Americans by European colonizers. The vast majority of Iowa's native prairie has been converted into farms, harming biodiversity. American food companies use chemicals in their products that the EU has banned for being too dangerous. Almond and alfalfa plants in the American West consume staggering amounts of water, while residents are forced to ration. Grocery stores bleach unsold food supply to stop homeless people from rummaging through their garbage. Food companies lobby Congress to influence the food pyramid. Employees responsible for making and serving food are paid absurdly low wages, with the assumption that tips will just make up for it. John Deere spent years opposing right-to-repair laws preventing farmers from fixing their equipment. Frankly, I could keep going, because food and its production overlaps with so many areas of our lives and impacts everyone. Food corporations don't want consumers thinking about what truly goes into food production because they benefit when people don't know how the sausage is made. A populace well educated on the nuances of food production can demand for changes in legislation and protest unethical practices. A consumer left in the dark about where their food actually comes from can happily buy their Frosted Flakes and Chef Boyardee. One thing that is particularly apparent about modern food production, and is responsible for many of our food problems, is how we view food as a commodity. Food is something we all need to survive, but capitalism has taken this necessity of life and turned it into an object that is to be bought and sold for a profit. Companies don't grow food because they want to feed people, at least not inherently. They grow food as a means to make money. If this sounds extreme, or you disagree with this point, look at all the ways corporations abandon opportunities to make their food more available to people, make their product worse, disregard the environment, and generally avoid doing the right thing because it might make them slightly less money. Because food is a commodity that is supposed to be used to make money, any system that gives people food for free is a threat to food corporations. It's why in many places giving food to homeless people is a criminal act that will literally get you arrested. To a certain extent, from the corporate perspective, food is grown to make money, and if it just so happens to feed people along the way, that's just a happy side effect on the path to its true goal. I'm grateful to have spent a lot of time in Iowa, since it has genuinely given me opportunities to think about how farming has impacted my communities. During the production of this video, grape harvesting season rolled around, and I worked with my cousin to harvest grapes, destem them, strain them, crush them, bag them, and freeze them for later use. Being able to take something directly from the vine to a more processed state is a useful skill, and is a great jumping off point to talk about the complexities of modern food production. Ultimately, this is a really complicated issue. Part of it goes back to the fact that we do need food to survive. We can't simply stop eating, but we can produce it more ethically. Of course, that is simple to say, but achieving that in reality is a monumental task that, to an extent, cannot be adequately achieved if food production is a commodity to make money. However, there are things that can be done. Legislation can be passed, and political movements can be supported that will make our food production better. It is imperative that we do so, because the consequences impact everyone. However, for that to happen, I believe that as a society, we should know more about our food, and not just with regards to consumption, but also about the behind-the-scenes machine that produces our food. Even if you aren't in a position of power, knowing about all aspects of your food gives you a lot to think about, and is a fascinating lens to examine our world with. So again, I ask, do you know where your food comes from?
তোমরা এসে কি খেতে চাও? What do you want to eat when you get here? I hear these words from the other end of the telephone every time I'm about to visit home. My mom's question never changes. My answer always does. I moved to the US for college in 2014 and have lived here since. In that time, my relationship with Bengali food has shifted, slowly but surely, as I've spent more time away from home. Bangladesh is primarily a land of farmers and fishermen. There's the saying, "Mache bhate Bangali." Fish and rice makes a Bengali. This cultural heritage means that most of our food, at its heart, tends to be simple. A fried fish you can snack on the way to work, or a quick meal of rice and squash before you turn in for the night. Vegetables are a part of almost every meal, so kids will have preferences for veggies instead of hating the food group outright. Mine were ladyfingers and spinach, in case you were wondering. Rice, fish, vegetables, eggs, and potatoes. Time and again, we see that simplicity is key, but within that simplicity lies oceans of possibility. The wide range of spices available in the subcontinent means every region has its own variation on any given dish, and these variations introduce complexity. To use a games metaphor, Bengali food prep has a low-skill floor and an astronomically high-skill ceiling. I am on the floor. Confession. I almost never prepared my own meals and took a lot of Bengali cuisine for granted growing up. Within my circles, men weren't really taught basic cooking skills in young age, which wasn't totally fair, given men do have a storied history of cooking and culinary practice in our culture. I grew up in relative wealth, as did most of my classmates at our quote-unquote English medium school, where English was the primary language of instruction. This meant that my friends and I could afford to try more kinds of food and even travel from time to time. We could afford to say that we didn't live off exclusively rice and fish, roti and lentils, chicken and chol. They seemed like the default options, and no one liked to say the default meals were their favorites, right? We could hang out at the diners that offered more quote-unquote novel foods. We could, on the same level, choose to indulge in street foods and food carts, or naan and kebab from roadside stalls. At gatherings, our parents would make fancier meals. Pulao, roast, fish bake, and that was something I could always look forward to in a way I didn't just the plain old rice, chicken, and potatoes we otherwise ate every day. We had options, and when you have options, you don't always see the value of your regular meals. You love what's special, and you don't realize how much you've come to count on what isn't. Until it is. My first year here, I tried to make a Dishy-style omelet and confirmed a terrible hypothesis. I am on the floor. I was incredibly privileged to be able to come to the US, but something I never realized until I did was that being relatively well off in Bangladesh did not translate to being well off anywhere else. Fast food joints and MNCs like KFC and Pizza Hut are considered luxury foods back home, while in the US they're considered to be cheap populist food for the masses. The standards are completely different. Here, I suddenly have more options than ever with McDonald's at the bottom of the chain, but those options are as expensive as they are extensive. I've gotten older. Food prices have gone higher. My partner and I don't eat out as much anymore, but we also don't have a whole lot of time to experiment with Bengali cooking. We don't have access to the same kinds of ingredients either, so we find other ways to bring home into our own kitchen. We use a rice cooker, fry frozen paratas, stick microwavable lentils in the microwave. Rice, vegetables, and fried egg have become sources of comfort for whenever we miss dishy food. The simplicity our meals are known for has become our beacon. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the mighty khichdi. A dish primarily comprising rice, lentils, turmeric, and spices, khichdi has been around in hundreds of variations across the Indian subcontinent since at least the 1300s, and reportedly in earlier variations since even centuries before that. It's a versatile dish, not just in its making, but also in use. It's soft enough that it's often the first solid food babies in South Asia will eat. It's flavorful enough that it pairs well with almost anything. And it's simple enough that it's one of the first things men who've never cooked before and immigrate to a new country will learn to make. It's something my late grandma tried to teach me before I left, to limited success. Here's the general formula. You boil rice and lentils together with spices, fried onions, and a healthy, or for better taste, unhealthy, amount of ghee or clarified butter, and combo it with salad, a simple fried egg, or beef curry and potatoes. It's already a straightforward dish, but with limited access to Deshi grocery stores and even more limited time, my partner and I use shortcuts to cut more costs, simplify it further, use more universally available ingredients, and adapt for our home away from home. We'll toss the rice and mushur dal, or lentils, into a rice cooker together. We'll season with salt and chili powder, and sometimes skip the raw green chili. We'll add turmeric, sprinkle cumin, and slather in a bit of ghee if we have it. As I mentioned earlier, this end result pairs incredibly well with salad, egg, or most proteins. And this is where we do find some more room to be more playful. Simplicity gives us room to try new things. For instance, my partner likes to add gochujang flakes to her fried eggs for that added kick we don't get without chili peppers. Simplicity also means that errors don't result in something inedible, but merely something different. On one occasion, my partner has gone in to make khichdi, and after a little too much water, pulled out the best damn rice porridge you've ever had. Tomra eshe ki khete chao? What do you want to eat when you get here? I hear these words from the other end of the telephone every time I'm about to visit home. My mom's question never changes. My answer always does. That first year I named the fancy dishes I'd missed. Pulao and roast, and also can we get Chinese from that one takeout place I like. The next summer, I named the local favorites, Star Kebab, Shawarma House, and listen, we have so many variations of sweets over there, but I'm feeling shondesh from Dad's hometown. But it didn't take long for me to start naming luchi and aloo dum, or potato curry, the homemade breakfast I'd once taken for granted and which still sings to me in my dreams. I started naming dishy mashed potatoes, which are similar to what you might know but with mustard oil, raw onions, and green chili. Basically, the spice kicked up a few notches. I started naming mangoes. Just mangoes. And sometimes, lately, I don't name anything at all. I just wait. I still don't name rice and chicken and ladyfingers with lentils and lemon, but that's only because I know I can count on it on the days we'll have nothing else. That doesn't mean I don't look forward to it too. I have a newfound appreciation for the simple and the everyday now, almost by necessity. In the everyday, I've found versatility. In the simple, I've found perspective. If Bengali food prep has a low skill floor and a high skill ceiling, then I am on the floor. And it feels pretty at home here to me.
Growing up, it felt like my mom would always be there to cook for me. I used to love coming home from school as a little kid and waiting with anticipation to eat whatever tasty meals she prepared for the family. Living in a Hispanic home, my mom would typically whip up classic Cuban dishes such as arroz con pollo, bistec empanizado, or my favorite, picadillo. Delicious dinners that I would eagerly devour and ask for seconds. Just reminiscing over these far-flung days of my youth, I can almost smell and taste her cooking again, bringing me back to a simpler period of my life. Time marches on, however, and I'm no longer the young tyke that my mother would dote on, sadly in more ways than one. See, there are a lot of things I miss about being a kid, but one in particular was my fast metabolism. I used to be able to eat anything and everything I wanted without ever thinking about how it would impact my body, and I remained thin despite my poor eating habits. This came to a screeching halt when I reached my mid-20s, because unbeknownst to me, this was around the time my body had decided to betray me. Enough was enough, it decided, and all of a sudden the pounds just started coming. Before I even realized it, I had gone from a skinny nerd to a chubby dork in what felt like an overnight transformation. On top of not eating right, you could not pay me to do cardio. This 1-2 punch of questionable health decisions was a recipe for disaster, and something had to give. Well, one day I decided to go to the doctor for a regular checkup, only to be met with a sincerely frightening wake-up call. Much to my genuine shock and horror, it was revealed to me by my doctor that I was pre-diabetic. This hit me like a freight train. I knew my health wasn't the best, but this? Just how was it possible that things had gotten this out of hand? From that point on, I decided no more excuses. It was time to get off my fat ass, cut out all the crap I had been eating, and start hitting the gym. I can't begin to tell you how tough this was for me. I had to make drastic changes in not only how I ate, but also my daily routine in order to incorporate exercise on a regular basis. Going out to eat in particular became agonizing, not because I had trouble finding healthy items on the menu, that was usually pretty easy. The real problem was everyone else I was going out to dinner with, ordering dessert, trying to convince me that it was okay to cheat a little and just have a bite. Summoning the will to politely decline felt like a Herculean task every single time. Thankfully, things got better, and my hard work really started to pay off in ways that took me by surprise. I continued to eat healthy and exercise regularly, resulting in me slimming down from a portly 180 pounds to a respectable 130. That's right, I was able to shed away 50 pounds. A fact that still boggles my mind and everyone around me who saw it happen in real time. I can unironically do the whole before and after shot comparison. It's kinda wild. Now, admittedly, while becoming more physically active played a significant role in how I was able to lose the weight, the food I ate was far more integral to this process, and since I don't live with my mom anymore, it was up to me to finally learn how to cook and do it in a way that complemented my diet. A fact that dawned on me with a palpable degree of anxiety. I mean, how do I even start? Before I answer that question, it's important to bring up a 2011 documentary called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. I can't remember when I saw it exactly, but it was definitely on Netflix a good number of years ago. The film follows Jiro Ono, owner of Suki Yabashi Jiro. But more importantly, he is one of, if not the greatest living sushi chef in the world. His restaurant is reservation only and requires waiting several months before being seated, and even when you finally park your tukis in the establishment, these sushi plates cost hundreds of dollars each. With that in mind, this sushi must look absolutely incredible, right? Just the most insane and creative stuff you've ever witnessed. Well, the truly bonkers thing is that his sushi looks so plain and average, like the kind of stuff you can get literally anywhere. How is it then that these modest looking plates of food command such exorbitant prices? How could sushi that looked so straightforward and ordinary possibly contain enough flavor to warrant 3 digits worth in dollar value? I think I know the secret. While watching, there was one line that Jiro Ono himself expresses in relation to his food that stuck with me in a profound way. Simplicity is the road to purity. Aside from the convenience of having my mom do all the cooking for me, a big reason I never wanted to get into it growing up was because it seemed so daunting from the outside looking in. Despite the fact I just didn't know any better, the act itself just seemed beyond me, as if it was this enormously complicated hurdle that I wouldn't be able to wrap my head around. However, it was watching this documentary and hearing this line where the gears started turning in my head. While I hadn't done anything about it quite yet, watching this made me realize that not only does making something not have to be this monumental obstacle, it also means that creating simple food doesn't automatically equate to being bland or tasteless. Well, I've never had any delusions that I could make anything even 1% as incredible as the legendary Jiro Ono. All the same, it gave me the inspiration I needed to get in the kitchen. After all, if such simple food was able to produce such incredible results, then evidently I'd been critically overthinking the entire concept of cooking. With all this in mind, it was time to just do it. After watching a few tutorials and my younger sister graciously providing some much needed pointers to steer me in the right direction, the result is a few pretty decent dishes. Keeping with the idea of remaining healthy, I tend to strictly make food that consists of a prominent protein and an assortment of veggies. Sometimes I'll venture into something a bit different to spice things up, but even then I'll use less fatty alternatives for a more health-conscious spin. The great thing about trying to remain healthy, however, is that it goes hand in hand with striving for simplicity. These dishes are not anything crazy, nor do they require tons of training or hours of preparation. Merely solid ingredients and a good handle of the basics. I'm far from a great chef and still have much to learn, but the fact that I was able to role reverse and cook for my mom instead, and for her to praise the food I prepared for her, was the strongest affirmation I could have gotten that I was on the right track. Looking back, it's kind of crazy to think that it all started with needing to be healthy and watching some random documentary that hammered in the idea that simplicity is actually a good thing.
I'm currently 33 years old, and to this day, I never learned how to cook. Like, never learned. I know right out of the gate that it sounds like I never tried to learn, but I do have at least a small excuse. I think it began once I completed high school and moved on to college. Maybe it was that sense of pseudo-independence that someone can experience when living away from home for the first time in their life. But being able to eat out as much as you want became appealing to me around that time. Senior year, with graduation and a potential career on my mind, I didn't take those chances in my on-campus apartment to break out the pots and pans and actually make a home-cooked meal. It never really occurred to me that it was something that could be done, or maybe I was tricking myself into thinking that. The closest I ever got was grilling burgers from the grocery butcher on a George Foreman grill. Sad, isn't it? It's kind of a bummer that I never took those early chances because now more than ever, I eat out so much. I've been working at my full-time job for more than 8 years now, and since then, the company I work at has grown so much. My responsibilities have expanded and my time at the office has stacked and stacked higher and higher. Aside from coffee and small snacks while on break, my food decisions often take place at the drive-thru. It's the same routine of bringing the food back to my apartment, sitting down on the couch, and eating while watching YouTube on the living room TV. Weekends are even more egregious as it's tough to turn down pizza delivery on a relaxing Saturday night between games and my programs. Trust me, I've loved pizza since I was a kid, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. The picture makes even less sense when considering the wild early 2020s. You'd think a pandemic-related lockdown would lead me to eating out less, but really, nothing's changed. Sure, it was tougher to get food at the store and bring it home to cook, but with the convenience of deliverable meals like Grubhub, I can't say I budged much. Safety first, of course, but with such a huge upheaval affecting the entire world, it's kind of shameful how I passed on what seems like the perfect time to learn how to cook at home. Those Red Robin onion rings were so tough to pass on, let me tell you. You'd think that being in my 30s, after finally having a stable, independent lifestyle that so many other people my age are struggling to obtain, that I'd actually learn to cook at home. My mother has been a cook as far back as I can remember. Hell, my best friend can cook, so I'm sure he could teach me a thing or two. But still, I never gave it a chance. Every day is the same. Get up, work, grab some grub at a local restaurant, go home and eat it, mess around on the PC for a while, then go to sleep. Rinse, repeat. Day after day. And yeah, I've always been a person of routine. Stability is a key philosophy that I value, so breaking out of the day-to-day processes is something I've rarely ever pursued. It's become so ingrained, so shackling, that it's so tough to break out of that mindset. It really doesn't help that cooking is just as much a science as an art in my eyes. I tend to look at other people's cooking abilities as very thorough and refined skills that take years and years to get just right. And as someone who's always on the move when it comes to his full-time job and whatever you call this YouTuber hobby, it's an equation that just doesn't add up. How can someone like me, whose routine totally dominates his life, drop the takeout and actually make something at home? It sounds easy. It is easy. Well, for anyone else, I would say. At this point, takeout is a part of my life, and I think that's actually a pretty fitting analogy to how things operate for me on the day-to-day. Picking up a burger or some tacos at a fast food joint is cheap, fast, and accessible. It's nothing lavish or ornate, not even close, but it's energizing and filling. It's something that's mindlessly assembled and cooked by underprivileged service workers, so many of whom are just trying to get by. All in all, it's fuel without the fluff, and for a lot of us, that's really all we want. Or to some, all we can even get. Maybe learning to cook something, to really cook something, could be an oasis in the dry desert of routine. I have weekends and I do like to use them, but even then, it's the routine of playing games, browsing the internet, and just mindlessly passing the time away. For someone who actually has the luxury of a stable work life with consistent periods away from the office, it makes a lot of sense to count those blessings and do something with that time beyond what I forced myself to abide by. As I said earlier, cooking is just as much an art as it is a science. There are so many outlets, from online recipe databases to YouTube cooking channels, that show that making something in the kitchen is not ever out of the working man's reach. Now, more than ever, anyone can cook at home. I don't think I'll ever break out of the routine of the takeout menu or the drive-thru. It's the bare facts. My life is always in motion, so for the sake of my own career, I'm going to have to make some kinds of compromises. But when looking at the day-to-day, maybe it's time for some kind of exciting break from the same old, same old. I like to imagine that you never really are locked in. You can make a change from what you're used to if you just brace yourself and go at it. Sometimes it just takes a push or two. And yeah, a little practice can go a long way too. But that's okay. Cooking is an art and a science. And when looking at either of those, you won't nail the perfect result on the first attempt. All the more reason to grab a pan and just keep trying. Bon appetit.
Recently, I ordered pizza, and there were several new pizza options. One was a shawarma pizza, but they also had a different type of pizza, and it was called a tandoori style, or also known in the Greater Toronto Area as Indian style. There might be some people in the audience who might call this sacrilegious. They might be saying, this disrespects the notion of all pizza. Where are the Italian ingredients? Hand gestures intensify. If there's a food that I think we can all agree is one of the most hostile foods in the world, it's probably pizza. So it begs the question, what is going on with pizza? And ultimately, what is pizza? Here we go! Let's try to think about pizza in some different ways. Pizza needs three things. It needs a base, usually flour, dough, you need a cheese, and you need a tomato sauce. And, tomato sauce, that's the most Italian thing you can get. The current understanding is that proto-pizza, i.e. pizza before pizza, did not have a tomato sauce because tomatoes are a plant from the New World. Tomatoes never existed in Italy, say, when you're thinking of Pompeii or the Roman Empire. Old world pizza as we know it is tomatoless. Maybe the pizza, it's not about the toppings. Maybe it's about the way that you make the pizza itself. Pizza is round. There are styles of pizza that are baked in pans, such as Nonna style pizza. Where does pizza begin and end? And why are things like pizza not considered pizza? Say, for instance, you have a calzone. They both use the same ingredients. They are often served on the same menu if you go to a pizzeria. We do not think of them as pizzas. We can also describe pizza as a pie. Pizza pie, but if you're to go to a restaurant and say, what kind of pie do you have in your menu? Your server will most likely say something along the lines of, we got apple, we got lemon meringue, signaling that pizza is in fact not really a pie in the context of our common speech. There's an article in Vice that I don't agree with, but they make an interesting argument stating that pizza is an open-faced sandwich. Arguing that pizza is a hot open-faced sandwich disregards the issue of pizza as a symbol, as a myth, and when cooked, forms a separate rhetoric from other means of caloric intake. When you go to a restaurant, look at the menu. Pizza is not considered a sandwich because pizza is never listed underneath sandwiches and burgers. They are in separate categories. Pizza is pizza. We know it because it has its own semiotic value that gives its pizzaness its own quality. Semiology is the study of symbols and processes by which these signs communicate themselves to the world. So when we think of symbols as communications, we can think of them as being pretty much everywhere. Pizza, in this instance, is a symbol that communicates a very specific symbology. So pizza can represent Italy, it can represent New York City, for instance, it can represent a vast array of geographical locations. But pizza can also represent food culture, and it can also represent more things than itself. Pizza as we know it today in its contemporary form is a recent cultural phenomenon, especially in North America. There's a brilliant PhD that I recently read by Alexander Hughes from York University in Toronto, who ate over 700 slices of pizza and researched the culture of pizza in the Great Lakes region of New York and Ontario. He compared two specific cities. He compared Toronto and the city of Buffalo, New York. In the 1950s, they had similar populations, they had similar economies, and they also had similar food cultures in regarding pizza. How pizza and food come into a new culture is generally through people. Immigration is what gets you good food. Don't forget that. After World War II, migration from across the globe brought new flavors and dishes and cuisines into Canadian and American cities. In the case of Italian immigration, pizza was brought over en masse to Canada. Often, these pizzerias and businesses formed by newcomers spurred business opportunities, which Hugh identifies, where he argues pizza becoming a commodity. However, these businesses initially formed under the pressures of marginalization, and they often formed ethnic economies where businesses would hire members from their own communities and often sell back to their own communities, as these products did not appeal to a wider Canadian or American audience. Many other pizza chains began dominating the Canadian landscape, introducing new types of pizza to consumers. In contrast, however, the city of Buffalo's economy shifted and actually faltered, leading to new business practices among these pizzerias, including offering submarine sandwiches and chicken wings as alternatives. Reading Hugh's thesis was a fantastic gateway into better understanding the context of pizza within the specific region of Canada that I live in. One thing that I will note is that it led me specifically to a really important, interesting text by Rosella Ceccarini, who provides 4 steps into transforming any food into a new culture. First, you need to naturalize the food. 2, are you able to preserve the traditions in this new geography? 3, if you can't find ingredients or other necessary things for a specific dish, can you improvise or substitute a component to get a semblance of the dish where it comes from? And fourthly, can you make this new remixed dish authentic to your new geography? Bringing back the symbolism of pizza and the qualms of Indian style pizza or shawarma on pizza, I think what I'm starting to pick out is that there seems to be a dissonance specifically between the 3rd and 4th step, and where the tension comes in is with the way that pizza has become almost a mythology in the way that it relates to the idea of pizzaness. The idea of a mythology is something that I wanted to adapt from a French philosopher. His name is Roland Barthes. Barthes wrote this essay series called Mythologies, where he investigated the systems that create modern myths. To Barthes, the formation of a mythology is a discursive practice that encompasses everything from speech and politics to the formation of an ideology, as well as a presentation of the symbol itself. This forms a critical dynamic on how the sign is communicated and received as authentic. And this has a lot to do with how myths hold power within our society. There's an excellent analysis by Barthes where he constructs this idea of Italianicity by analyzing the symbols in Italian pasta advertisements. You often see ingredients that are associated with the cuisine and the culture of the cuisine. You have tomatoes, you have the Italian tricolor, you got the green, you got the white, you have the red. You don't see Parmesan, you see Parmigiano Reggiano. But in the formation of pizza as a mythology, it is also imposed by the maker in the application of applying these symbols. For example, the signification that pizza is round, that pizza is tomatoey, it is Italian. Pizza, therefore, becomes a myth where itself becomes an allegory for the social and the political and economic struggles of a community finding a place in a new culture and new institutions. So there's a tension with what people consider to be the essential pizza. As we discussed at the start of our arguments, is it circular? Is it Italian? I guess we can say pizza has a je ne sais quoi when we start to describe it. We kind of know it's pizza because it's pizza. But to definitively say pizza is fixed is inherently false within the scope of the social, political, and cultural boundaries that we've already discussed. Pizza from Italy is not going to be the same as pizza from Canada. If we were to think of pizza through an essentialist lens, we would then need to disregard the New York style slice of pizza, the countless iterations and adaptations that you find across the United States and Canada, and more. These iterations of pizza as we know it would not exist and bring joy to the many people who consume pizza regularly. So we can't really say that there is an essential pizza, because if we are to say that there is an essential pizza, it means that all the pizza that we know and love that we consider authentic is actually not authentic. Pizza becomes a tool that allows us to identify the underlying rhetoric of the person making that pizza, or even the person eating that pizza. Pizza becomes a tool or a medium that allows us to tell our stories. The flavors help to persuade our arguments for legitimacy and respect when it is often not granted due to hardship or even lacking knowledge and fear. As a metaphor, the resignification of pizza is evident in the Canadian food landscape, specifically when it comes to shawarma style and Indian style. The consumption of pizza in these instances permits a continuation of the pizza dish tradition of resignifying and refining ingredients that are comfortable to not only you and your flavor palette, but also your community's flavor palette. So let's make a Waterloo style pizza.
What is Waterloo style pizza? I don't know. We're going to make it because we're going to use this resignification, remixing theory to build out a pizza that is local / representative of local culture within Waterloo. Step 1.
So I'm first going to add a German sausage, but Germany acts as kind of a large signifier within the region. They hold the largest Oktoberfest outside of Germany. And the last thing we're going to add are blackberries, because Waterloo is home of the blackberry, and it wouldn't be a bold choice to not include fruit on a pizza.
Oh, she's beautiful! Oh my god.
Wow. We're just gonna crush the sage and we're just gonna put it on top. Now I'm going to get that under there. Okay, so my guests have arrived and I'm gonna show them the pizza and... What? You brought pizza?
Just in case you messed it up.
Oh my god! Roast me!
Okay, can you record yourself cutting this because you look like Kendall Jenner cutting a cucumber?
I look like Kendall Jenner cutting a cucumber?
See how you're holding the knife?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to cut for the camera.
Hey, chef, do you want to cut this up for her?
I am recording. Nice rise. She's a triangle. She's got some blackberry juice, some cheesiness, some tomatoiness. Looks good.
Tastes like pizza.
Mmm.
It's good.
The seeds.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's different.
Mm-hmm. It is.
It's unique. Look at that stringy cheese.
I see what you say about the blackberry seeds.
Yeah.
Maybe as like a drizzle at the end, it would be better.
Yes.
What kind of pizza did you get?
Not sponsored. Mortadella pizza with arugula, mortadella,
Truffle sauce?
truffle sauce. Yeah. It's really yummy.
Both in their own ways.
I'm just hungry, so I'm gonna eat anything.
And what did we learn today, class? They're both good in their own ways.
You put anything on the pizza, it'll probably turn out okay.
That's the moral of the story. Thanks, Chris.
Oh no, the pizza arguments are starting all over again.
Like in the comments, which is better?
What is a pan? A miserable little pile of secrets. Well, okay, it's a cast iron pan, but that's all I know about this. 8-inch rim, slightly flared sides, but, you know, that's it. Okay, let me explain. I went to an estate sale one weekend with my girlfriend, and as we wandered around this house, I spied an old cast iron pan, but it was absolutely caked in grime. I had heard about cast iron collecting before, with some people mentioning finding old pans that ended up being nearly 100 years old, and sometimes worth several $100s. Wanting to give it a try, I picked up the pan for $5, determined to get it back into working condition. The cleaning process took a couple of weeks of trying to clean and scrape as much gunk off of this thing as I could. After removing the residue with a highly sophisticated set of tools, scouring away rust, and curing it in the oven a few times over, I was left with this beautiful piece of cookware. But, as I noticed, there were absolutely no markings on it. No manufacturer, year, location, pattern number, or even size. So, at the end of all of this, I was left with a mystery. Albeit a mystery that's pretty good at cooking pancakes. Where did this pan come from exactly? I started doing some digging, and wouldn't you know it, there's a whole community dedicated to this sort of thing. So, why are old iron pans so valuable? Well, humanity has had cast iron cookware for a long time, but in particular, the Industrial Revolution led to the founding of a large number of cast iron foundries, including here in America. CastIronCollector.com has compiled a list of literally hundreds of these companies, but among the more notable names prior to 1900 included Griswold, Wagner, and Vollrath. After the turn of the century, other big names like Birmingham Stove and Range, Chicago Hardware Foundry, and Lodge would emerge. The cast iron industry was holding strong into the middle of the 20th century, but in the 1960s a new cooking technology emerged called Teflon. Pretty soon, non-stick pans were a staple in almost every American home, and the humble cast iron pan was muscled out. As a result, all but one cast iron manufacturer, Lodge, went out of business or pivoted to other sectors, hence why cast iron from this earlier period is so rare. If you want to get into collecting antique cast iron, there's a number of places you could try to scope them out. I got my mystery pan at an estate sale, and those are certainly good places, but a number of collectors also advocate scoping around antique stores or even thrift stores like Goodwill. I found a couple of Griswold pieces in an antique store in Leadville, Colorado, but clearly the people there knew what they had. So, how do you go about identifying a pan? Well, quite a bit of the time it's just stamped with the manufacturer's name, like this Griswold I bought at an antique mall in Vermont that dates back to the 1930s. But beyond that, it can be a bit arcane. Fortunately, however, there's several features of this mystery pan that can help us narrow things down. First, the smooth surface. Lodge is the only manufacturer from the golden era of cast iron still operating, and that's because back in the 1990s they had a pretty interesting idea. See, cast iron is known for this property called seasoning, which results from layers of oil and fat polymerizing, which provides a glassy surface that, while not non-stick per se, is pretty stick resistant. However, back in the day, it took a while to get a good season built up on a new cast iron pan. So, at the turn of the millennium, Lodge asked themselves, why not do that for the customer before we ship our cookware out? After some experimentation, Lodge found that a rough, pebbly surface on the pan held a seasoning better than a smooth, glassy surface, and thus, the pre-seasoned pan was introduced. Apparently it was a big hit, and Lodge has managed to survive to this day. So, we can say at the very least that the smooth surface of this pan means that it was made prior to the year 2002. Which, well, big whoop, right? But because there's no markings at all on this pan, that also gives us another clue. See, in the 1960s it started to become a trend for cast iron manufacturers to start including a Made in America or Made in USA stamp on their cast iron. It's believed that Wagner started doing this at some time in the early 60s in response to East Asian companies starting to make their own cast iron cookware and ship it over to the US. And because of some things that were going on at the time, other companies started following suit, adding their own Made in the USA stamp as a marketing move. At this time, only Wagner, Lodge, and BSR were still in operation in the United States, so any pans from this period with that stamp are pretty definitively from one of those three brands. Because no such mark exists on my pan, and because foreign goods imported into the US were required to label their country of origin since about 1930, we know that it dates back to at least the 1960s. Now we're getting somewhere. There's one last clue that we have available to us, this mottled texture along the outside of the pan. Turns out that's called a hammer to finish, and this was a pretty common decorative technique that was used by a number of manufacturers, but the one that kept getting mentioned was the Chicago Hardware Foundry. Take this example I found on eBay. The design looks pretty similar, with two pour spouts molded at either side, and it's got that hammer finishing on the outside, but mine has a bit more of a defined lip on the edge, and the loop molded into the handle has these little creases that mine doesn't. And even this pan has a marking on the back, an 83B, that indicates what mold it was using. Plus, this one's only 6 inches and, mine's bigger. This other one matches the size, but again, less defined lip, crease on the handle, and the molding number. No such luck. Unfortunately, this is the end of the road, which leaves us with one... Hey, hang on a minute. Back up. No, scroll down. What's that one right there? No, the second one. Holus molus. The hammered pattern. And there's no marks on the bottom. The handle loop is exactly the same, and there's even these two weird divots on the underside of the handle. It says it's a Wagner? Holy crap! I found the exact same pan. I mean, it's a size or two smaller, but clearly it's from the same line. I found a fucking Wagner for $5. Wait a minute. How do they know it's a Wagner? So at the very least, searching for a Wagner hammer finished cast iron brought up a number of other results of this series of pans. And sure enough, they're all exactly like mine, and everybody insists they're Wagner. But castironcollector.com's page on Wagner doesn't mention these at all, and the usual channels I watch on YouTube don't talk about them either. So, what's going on? Well, I finally found this post on Pinterest that says Wagner sold a bunch of these to Sears under the brand name Merit, back in the day that Sears was still Sears Roebuck. This was not at all uncommon for cast iron manufacturers to do, and there's a number of series of unmarked pans that are sought after by collectors. But the thing is, searching for information on Merit pans, everyone keeps saying that Griswold made them, not Wagner. But at the very least, this gave me a lead. Fortunately, Sears Roebuck catalogs are pretty well documented, so I started searching them. And, when you know it, in the 1940 Sears catalog, there's a photo of a Merit pan with a hammered finish that looks like mine. In the size table as well, a size 5 pan corresponds with an 8-inch diameter, which lines up with what this listing on Etsy is claiming. Although, interestingly, it also has weights listed to the side, and when I weighed my pan, I found that it was significantly lighter, even lighter than the next size down. Let's also take a moment to reflect on the term waterless cooking being advertised so much here. Don't boil your steaks, folks. Incidentally, this is the only Sears catalog that I could find that had this hammered line of cast iron in it. Going forward in time, either the cast iron becomes smooth again, or the cast iron isn't advertised at all. Going backwards, I can't find any catalogs from the 1930s at all. The only trace of them I can find is this scan from the cast iron subreddit of the 1936 cast iron pans that were advertised. Again, these are smooth on the outside, and people in the comments are attributing these to Griswold. So, all I have to go on is a side photo of a pan from a Sears catalog that I can't really get a good look at, that I also don't have any concrete proof of being manufactured by Wagner. That and the say-so of a few resellers on the internet. So, I'm either barking up the completely wrong tree, or I very precisely dated this thing to being a 1940 Wagner pan that was sold through Sears Roebuck. Say, wasn't this a video about food? Despite cast iron falling out of favor for being such an ancient technology, it seems like it's going to have a bright future. For a while, Lodge was the only game in town, but in the past decade or so, a number of smaller manufacturers have popped up as interest has resurged in cast iron cookware. And to be clear, the Lodge pans that you can buy at most places for $30 are still really solid. I bought this one at a Cracker Barrel outside of Lincoln, Nebraska. Trust me, I didn't want to be there. It also seems cast iron might be better for the environment than a lot of our modern cookware. Turns out the Teflon that first supplanted cast iron is horrible for the environment and your body. While Teflon is relatively safe to cook with, it can start to flake off over time. Teflon is a substance that's part of a chemical group called PFAS, which, if ingested, can build up in your body, and it's believed to have a half-life of about 10 years. Teflon manufacture also creates other PFAS chemicals as byproducts, which regrettably get released as air and water pollution. Cast iron, by contrast, can just be melted down and poured into new molds, and, at least from what I've seen at Lodge, molds are made from sand, which is also reused. On the subject of pollutants, gas stoves are also pretty bad for your health, flooding the air with a lot of noxious chemicals. The future of cooking technology appears to be induction burners, which heats cookware via magnets. I had an induction burner in my last apartment and it was super cool, and I've been craving one ever since. But of course, for the magnets to do anything, your cookware has to be magnetic. And while aluminum and ceramic cookware aren't, cast iron and stainless steel certainly are. And, of course, cast iron is really versatile. With it, you can cook something on the stovetop, then finish it in the oven, or vice versa. You can use it on the grill, or on a fire if you're camping. Plus, you can use it for home defense purposes. So, the next time you're at a yard sale or a thrift store, take a look around and see if you can find any pans. You might find some black gold.
I'm here in Bluff, the very southernmost point of the South Island of New Zealand, where bluff oysters come from. And bluff oysters are commonly said to be the best oysters in the world. I've never eaten an oyster because I don't like seafood. A can of tuna is about my limit for seafood taste. So we're going to go up to the cafe behind my cameraman and try some oysters and see what I think. I nearly chucked that one back up. It's not just the ocean. It's it tastes like a rock pool, like a standing rock pool. Glowing review. Come to Bluff. Come say hi. Make sure you say hi if you come to Bluff. Tell them I sent you.